Alright, so this video is how to sharpen a knife. So you're gonna grab a whetstone, make sure it's wet, make sure you soak it in water for a few minutes before you start this. Makes it easier, it takes way less of the stone. So what you're gonna do is start by putting the knife flat against the stone. Alright, you wanna put 2 fingers at the top. You wanna make sure that you have it secure at the bottom, okay? You don't wanna mess around because it can slip and you'll cut yourself. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get rid of the space between the stone and the knife. All right, so in order to do that, you're putting pressure at the top. Okay, you can use as many fingers as you want. Make sure that you have that edge kind of down. All right, again, with the other hand, make sure it's the same thing, however you want to do it. If you want to put your thumb on the blade as well, or if you just want to hold at the handle. Do what you can to make sure that that gap, the space in between the stone and the knife, is gone. Okay, so what I do is fingers at the top. Okay, you want to apply even pressure when you're sharpening. Get rid of the space between the gap or the stone and the knife. All right, so you can see slightly that if I put enough pressure at the top, the space is almost gone. You're going to need to put just a little bit more. So what I like to do is I'll start at the beginning of the stone, and as I start to move forward, I'll kind of turn the knife just to make sure that I'm getting rid of that gap. Right, so you'll see here, okay, as I'm pushing forward, I just turn it slightly just to make sure that gap's gone. Okay, so space in between the stone, no space, space, no space, space, no space. Okay, you don't want to turn too much. All right, you're only turning enough until that space is gone, because if you turn too much, you're eventually going to create too wide of an angle, which will be fine for, you know, a few months, but eventually you're going to get a knife that looks kind of like this. It's a little bit harder to tell in the video, but the metal is very thick. All right, so in this one, the metal is very thin. Okay, you have a nice point. All right, if you look at it from the side, you can see very thin. This knife, it's a little bit harder to tell because it's on video, but this knife is not so thin. Okay, very thick metal. So if I were to sharpen this knife, all right, if you were to do it the way I just told you, there's a huge gap. Even with me applying pressure at the top the same way I did, there's a huge gap between the stone and the knife. So in order to get it sharp, you know, for the day, you can just get rid of that gap the same way. You're creating a much larger angle than I did with the other knife. All right, and a larger angle is fine. It's just not going to be as sharp as the previous knife. So what I would do with this is you kind of have to wear down the metal. All right, so basically you want to use kind of the natural angle of the knife. All right, every knife has their own kind of angle. Start thicker at the top, thinner at the bottom. All right, so what I would do, and this would take a while, which is kind of why you don't want to get into this predicament, is you just find like that kind of natural angle of the knife, and you just kind of have to wear the metal down. But again, this is going to take a while. All right, so don't really, it's better to get a new knife, all right, and make sure that that doesn't happen. So again, even pressure, okay, across. As you're moving forward, okay, you kind of turn the knife just a little bit. You can even hear it. The sound's different if there's a different sound between here when the point is not touching and this when the point is touching. There's a different sound. So, okay, you can hear it. What I'll do is probably 10 to 20 times each side. Again, you want to make sure you're using the whole stone, okay? You're going from the bottom to the top. All right, and you're gonna do each side. You don't want to just do little movements like this because it's gonna wear down the stone. The stone's gonna form kind of a U shape, and then it's not gonna be as effective anymore. You're gonna need a new stone. All right, so you use the whole stone. All right, so again, knife down. All right, pressure at the top, get rid of the gap. Okay, so 10 times or so on each side, then you'll come to the other side. Same deal. Pressure at the top, even pressure at the bottom. Okay. Gap, no gap, gap, no gap, gap, no gap. Okay. That's what you want. No gap. All right. Run it across. Now what I like to do every once in a while as well is I try to thin the blade down, okay? again, try to avoid a thick blade, thin the blade down. So what I'll do is basically what I did before, but I'm not worried as much about getting rid of the gap between the knife and the stone. I'm trying to wear down the metal on the rest of the knife, not just create the edge. So I already have the edge. Okay, I already made the edge when I got rid of the gap. Now I'm just trying to thin down the metal of the blade because this will make sure that the blade will be good for a longer amount of time. All right, so basically the same thing that I did earlier. Okay, pressure at the top, pressure at the bottom, and I'm just running the knife across the stone. I'm not as worried about, again, turning the knife to make sure that the gap's going. I'm just wearing down the metal on the rest of the blade to try to make it even with the edge. All right, so that's basically all there is. Again, this blade on the other knife needs a lot of thinning down, so what I would do, I would find that same thing and I would just work at it for a while. You're gonna have to work at this knife for a while in order to kind of thin the blade down as much as I have on the first knife. So that's basically all there is.